you know what, like we have a reputation for being crazy and, you know, the weird ones and all of that. And it's like, well, everyone else is standing in front of the same ball. Like some of my defenders stand next to me in front of the same ball with just a mouth guard. So it's like, they're the crazy ones.
This is Legends with Bevo, thanks to Bet Odyssey, Renelec Electrical Services, and Anytime Fitness Glenelg. And now, here's your host, Bevo.
Hockeyroos goalkeeper and superstar, two-time Olympian, Rachael Lynch. Welcome to Legends with Bevo for the very first time. Great to have you on for a chat.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, the list goes on. You're also an Are You OK ambassador. You're a registered nurse, which you've been doing for 10 years now. We'll get to that a little bit later on because you've been doing amazing things with COVID. I don't know how you balance that with being a full-time professional athlete, but we'll start with a bit of a serious side of things. And obviously, being a professional hockey player, it can't have all been wins for you. Do you remember the first real big fail you experienced and how that made you feel? And how did you get past those failures, Rach?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a young age, being a goalkeeper, you sort of learn to be a little bit more resilient. There's only one spot on the team, and there's often two goalies. So I've probably had majority of my junior career where I was, going through that process of understanding what it means to miss out, to not be selected, to fail if you like. But probably once I made the Australian team, it was, missing out on my first Olympics in 2008. And then I did it again in 2012, 4 years later. So had a long road to my first Olympics. It took me 10 years, so plenty of learnings along the way. And as an athlete, spending that time reflecting and trying to figure out how do you make sure it doesn't happen again.
That must just make you feel so proud, having been to those two Olympics in Rio 2016 and this year in Tokyo, knowing that you've sort of been through all those hard times, that you've actually been able to get to those two Olympics must make you feel really proud as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're more special when you have to fight so hard for them. And I've, super proud of my career even without those Olympics. And it's a really hard thing because if you say to anyone you play for Australia, the first thing they're going to say to you is, have you been to the Olympics? And for a long time, the answer for me was no. But achieved a couple of gold medals along the way with Commonwealth Games and World Cups and different events like that. So, I mean, the relief I felt when I was selected for Rio was pretty intense, knowing that I'd had to make some real changes and put myself into a position where essentially they had to pick me. And then, Tokyo was a whole different ball game with, some of the things that went on in the lead up to that.
And your junior hockey career, Rach, what was the first real big success you ever felt, like back when you were a kid? And how did that make you feel? And did you sort of feel when you actually had that success that you had the ability to be able to make it on the big stage and one day represent your country?
I don't know. As a kid, I played so many different sports. And in grade 6, when I first tried hockey, I tried out for a whole range of sports for the primary school state team. So basketball was my sport at the time. Soccer, I tried rugby and hockey. And I remember being completely devastated when I missed out on the basketball because I'd been playing at a club level for a long time and I wasn't really tall enough, so they picked these like huge girls that weren't super coordinated but had the height. So that was tough. But then, got an opportunity with hockey. My school had some equipment, so I went to the trial as a goalie and a field player, and they picked me as a goalie. So that was, I guess, my first win. But in that moment, I sort of, I had no thoughts around going to an Olympics or anything like that. I wasn't a kid that dreamt of doing that. I just loved sport. My main goal in life was just to be better than my brother at all the sports that I did, not to go to an Olympics.
And were you always a goalkeeper growing up as a kid as well? I'm always interested in that, and whether, with the same with goalkeepers in soccer, whether it's something they started from a young age or whether you started off, say, as a midfielder and then turned into a goalkeeper. Sort of how did that work, Rach?
Yeah, so the state team in primary school was when they made the decision for me. So they picked me as a goalie, not a field player. Going through high school, we had a pretty good team, so I played on the field there. There's no point standing in the goals. Yeah, I mean, I have moments now where I'm out on the pitch watching the girls do their beat test and just feel so grateful that I chose to be a goalie.
That is brilliant.
It's like, go girls, good work. And they hate it. It's like, well, you could have been a goalie.
Having said that, though, I've got so much admiration for you. And I was watching the Olympics as the whole of the world was and cheering on the Aussies. You did such an amazing job. Unfortunately, didn't quite come home with a medal, but, nevertheless, we won't talk about that. One thing I've got so much respect for is goalkeepers, because you're getting the ball smashed at you 100 miles an hour. Yes, you got protection, but gee, you got a tough job, Rach.
Well, you learn to love the pressure and embrace the positional requirements, I suppose. But you know what? Like, we have a reputation for being crazy and, you know, the weird ones and all of that. And it's like, well, everyone else is standing in front of the same ball. Like, some of my defenders stand next to me in front of the same ball with just a mouth guard. So it's like, they're the crazy ones.
Have you ever thought of, you know, actually saying to your coach, all right, I want to play in the midfield today? Or, you know, are you just one of those things where you just pigeonholed as a goalkeeper?
It's such a specialist skill, and you know, you could argue the same for all the field players. There's no way I would make it at this level. You know, even probably a state level, I'd be, you know, 2s or 3s maybe at the club level. But it is my dream to score a goal one day, and I do carry a mouth guard in my goalie bag just in case I ever get the opportunity. Because there's been times on tournaments where, you know, a couple of players have been injured or illness has gone through a team, and there was actually an example. I think it was a German goalie. I don't know if he was their second goalie. He ended up getting put on the field because they needed someone, and he scored a goal. So it's one of those hard ones, because if anything goes wrong, I'd rather be in the goals. But if the opportunity comes up, I'll jump at it.
And you mentioned before the rest of the team are doing beat tests and you sort of don't get involved in that. So do you still have your own fitness program being a goalie? I'm sure you still have to be, you know, you look really fit and stuff. So you must still have your own fitness program as well.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's very specialist. So we do a lot more sort of shorter, sharp agility work, you know, strength as well. When the girls do the running, yeah, we just do, you know, shorter distances, quicker reps. I ride my bike, so that's my conditioning. And now that we're in pre-season at the moment, I'm doing that, you know, a few times a week. Did a big charity ride on the weekend, did 200 Ks. So aerobically not too bad, but more on the bike. My 15 years of hockey have done a little bit of damage to my knees, so I can't run like the girls can. But I believe your fitness is super important at all levels. You know, when I do a bit of coaching, and when I coach young kids, they sort of think, oh, well, I'm the goalie, I don't have to do the running. And it's like, yeah, but there's something pretty powerful about doing a really hard conditioning session with your teammates and, you know, all high-fiving at the end. And I guess the camaraderie that comes with that is important. But it's also, and Tokyo is a perfect example, if you're not fit, your decision-making suffers, your ability to recover, you know, your ability to move around the pitch, certainly over there, just so hot. And I knew fitness was going to be a really key factor. So I made sure I was far and away the fittest in the group of goalies, you know, because that sort of stuff can be the difference when it comes down to selection. And
looking back at Rio 2016, what was your fondest memory there, Rachel? And you know, tell us more about that. And I guess what it was like inside the village for your very first Olympics, and in comparison to, say, Tokyo 2020.
It was cool, you know. It was, first Olympics. I think being a bit older helped. I was a lot more mature as an athlete, so didn't feel as overwhelmed. But you can't help but get around and get excited about all the different, you know, stalls and the athletes and the food hall and all of that stuff. And, you know, we got opportunity to settle into all of that before we competed. The village was huge. I remember that, doing heaps of Ks. So there was buses to get around, but because you'd walk to the food hall 3 times a day, I remember doing like 14 Ks a day of walking, just going to and from not the food hall all day, but just going to the food hall, the transport mall. But I mean, it was cool. There was probably my fondest memory. We played against Argentina in a must-win game, and it was filled with drama actually, because I was storing my goalie gear at the ground, and it was, you know, in a sectioned off area, but volunteers and that had access. And when I got to the ground, my smocks had been stolen. So I got all my gear on, and then the smock is one of the last things I put on, and I realised my smocks had been stolen, so my Aussie ones. Anyway, so luckily we had a spare, so the manager gave me the spare, and then played the game. In the game, we ended up winning 1-0, and I saved a stroke, so there was a stroke given away, like a penalty. Saved that, so, you know, that was a pretty cool moment, because it was I had to save it, obviously. And then did some media after the game, went back to get changed, and when I took all my goalie gear off, they'd then come back and stolen all my clothes. So they'd taken my singlet and my shorts, and whoever it was, I don't know, it's probably just some fan, because, you know, my fancy watch sitting there, and they left that, but they took all the Aussie uniforms. So it was a bit of an action-packed day, but, you know, some really good memories from that tournament and the event itself, because we had like heaps of family and friends over there, and they had a ball.
And then vice versa with Tokyo 2020. I've heard from some of the athletes who are involved in this year's Olympics that it was like an Olympics with, like no other, with your COVID checks all the time and not being able to sort of experience that same feeling as Rio, not being able to associate with other countries and stuff. Did you find the same kind of thing, Rachel?
Yeah, but it had its benefits because I think it really brought the Australian team together as a whole. We were fortunate as a team. You've got plenty of people to hang out with, and that's what we do on tour normally. We just hang out with our group. A bit of a shame that people couldn't interact so much with other athletes, but we were there to do a job. No one wanted to risk getting COVID. The Australian Olympic Committee did a fantastic job with how they set up the village for us. And then even out on at the competition venue, the fact that there was no crowds, like the buzz is amazing, obviously, but it just removes so much pressure. So we could just go out there and play like we would, if we're down at Perth Hockey Stadium every week. So it felt very normal, and I think allowed a lot of our debutantes and the younger girls to perform probably closer to their potential than maybe you would at a debut Olympics.
That's incredible hearing that, because speaking to people in the past, they found it quite different and difficult because they rely on crowds so much. But hearing that it actually wasn't as bad, it's actually quite interesting hearing those different perspectives. Yeah,
and the other thing, like a lot of the build up to an Olympics, normally you're talking about things like communication. And for me as a goalie, that's a key element to my job, is being able to call what's in front of me and help direct the girls. And there's no crowd noise, so they could hear everything I said. And that's just another thing that you don't have to worry about that normally is a concern for an Olympics. And even the families, you would think having family there is, it's great and wonderful, but it's, again, something you just don't need to worry about. Like, I've had my family come and watch me play, and it's amazing, and I love that they're there, but you can't help but wonder, like, what are they doing? Who are they talking to? All of that sort of stuff that just was taken away for Tokyo, and all we had to do was concentrate on each other, on our team, and the job we were there to do.
And interesting as well, speaking to some of the other athletes, way back in the, the 90s and the 80s, and hearing their experiences of the Olympic Village. And I think I spoke to Rachel Spawn, and she was saying there was 9 McDonald's at one of the villages that she was a part of. Was a bit like that with Tokyo and Rio as well, just heaps of food. And what was your the meal that your go-to meal that you had after competing, Rachel? Was there something that you did, like you smashed a bowl of ice cream or something like that?
We had McDonald's in Rio, but waited till the end before we went there. And then, of course, because we go the whole 2 weeks, there's a massive lineup for all those athletes that have been hanging out. Tokyo, very different. There was a main food hall and then a smaller dining hall. Lots of sort of traditional food, freshly cooked Japanese food, which was awesome. We had to get a bit creative. So one of the genius ideas that we ended up with was they had like the bao buns, or whatever they're called, those sort of white buns, but they were empty. But if you made your way around the food hall, you could find things like little fried chicken, and then there was the salad bar, so you could build your own little bao buns, which was awesome. I mean, you eat the same things because once you find stuff that is healthy and suitable, you kind of stick to that. So when we got back, we went straight into hotel quarantine. So again, couldn't control what we were eating, but there was a bit of, nice coffees. That was something that people were itching for, and, a baked treat from the local cafe.
I can just imagine. And in terms of, some of the famous athletes that, again, Tokyo probably was a little bit different because you spent most of the time with the Australians, but was there ever a time at Rio, say, where you got to come up close and personal with one of your idols, whether it be a male or female athlete, Rachel?
A few around in Rio, some of the basketballers, that was pretty cool. But in Tokyo, actually, someone who created a bit of a stir in the village was Yao Ming. So he's the basketballer. He doesn't play anymore, but he must be in the coaching staff or in the staff for the Chinese women. So he's the guy who was like 7'8" or something ridiculous, and he's huge. And so he was walking around the food hall a couple of times, and you can't help but stare. And I'm a basketball fan, so I knew who he was, but it was almost, it's this funny kind of uncomfortable feeling because he's there as, athlete or official, whatever. But even in that environment, amongst the best athletes in the world, he still gets hassled. And, everyone had good intentions and just wanted a photo, but you could see every single person that asked him, he said no, because it's like he probably just wants to enjoy his food and not being able to escape. So you have this sort of feeling of you really don't want to bother anyone, even though you're kind of, fangirling on this particular person. So, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. But certainly amongst the Australian team, everyone was just so giving of their time and would have a photo and, let you touch their medal or whatever it was, which is pretty cool.
That is really cool. And let's go back to earlier this year, because last year I should say, there was a situation where it wasn't a great one for you, Rach, because controversially you're dumped from the Aussie side, after being there with Rio and all the other success that you've had. Luckily, through review, you were reinstated back into the team and went to Tokyo, as we know. Tell us about that experience, like firstly when you found out that you were dumped from the team and how you sort of got reinstated. Tell us all about it, how it all went about.
Yeah, well, I mean, could probably take up most of the podcast talking about that part. It's, it was a really, really horrible time, completely unexpected, really, I guess, disappointing the way that it played out. There'd been a lot of challenges within our program and various things that happened in the lead up. And then, myself and Georgie Morgan, my teammate, both got dropped. And, even the timing, it's like I'd recently been named International Goalie of the Year. Felt like I was in, mentally and physically my best shape and playing well. So it was kind of like, it's pretty rough. And the circumstances around it is the reason why we both put in an appeal. And the appeal was very foreign to both of us. We had to get lawyers. We had Lavin Legal, a company here in Perth that did a pro bono for us because, I've never had to do anything like that before. And certainly having been through it, that I would have had to sell my apartment to pay for it. So it was pretty horrific, but we fought really hard. And during that time, I guess the biggest challenge was, I was just so determined that, the right person to take us to Tokyo and have success there. I had that sort of belief in myself that, not just in my ability, but my leadership, the level of care and things that I had for the group and how I was as a person that allowed me to kind of keep my head up and stay on track during that time. I kept training. It was really hard. I was working full time and so was Georgie, but getting up in the morning and trying to squeeze your training in before going to work. And most of it I could do by myself, like go for a ride or do some running and gym work. But as a goalie, it's pretty hard. You put the goalie gear on and you kind of need a friend. It's tough to train by yourself. So, yeah, really, really challenging time. And in the end, we won the appeal after, I think it was 150 days it took, which was just so incredibly frustrating that it took that long. And then by the time we got back, we were then, rather than being reinstated, which we thought would happen, we were then given an opportunity to trial again, which was really brutal. And the disappointing part of that was that for Georgie, who's got, a few chronic injuries, because she hadn't had the support, the physio, the doctor, all those sort of supports during that time, which was all cut off, it made it really hard and sort of her body wasn't ready to go. But I was lucky to get back in, I guess, thanks to, the effort that I put in during that time. But from the moment I got back in to the day the Olympic team was announced, I actually only had 4 weeks. So my Olympic preparation was 4 weeks with the team, which is, in a 5-year cycle, that's sort of not really what you would think would happen. But I guess, proud of the way that I carried myself through that time and how hard I worked. And, when I got back in, I had to do fitness testing and I got PBs and, I was in the best shape I'd been for a long time. And I guess came back to my experience with Rio. It was, I knew what I needed to do to get myself right. And despite having sort of some mental health challenges during that time, I guess thanks to the circumstances, I still fought really hard and was determined to do it for the girls. I knew the girls wanted me back in there, and that's what got me out of bed each morning.
Absolutely unbelievable story. Credit to you. Far out, 4 weeks preparation and you still kicked butt over there in Tokyo and you sort of stuck it up the ones that dropped you, didn't you? So,
well, yeah, I mean, we had a lot of staff that resigned during that time, and I guess it was, the irony wasn't lost to me when I was over in Tokyo to think that, I was there and able to, not just represent myself, but I felt like I was there representing Georgie as well, who had been dropped, and she didn't deserve to go through any of that. Being around the group and doing what I loved was, it was even more special knowing what I'd been through.
Did they sort of give you more information in terms of why you got dropped as well?
Yeah, we had to have a meeting. I mean, essentially it was around, part of it was one from a query that I raised in a meeting. So we had a meeting and one of the girls had been removed from the team. She took some time off for mental health reasons. I raised a concern around that because, I don't think you should lose your your scholarship for wanting to do that. And yeah, essentially it stemmed from there. They didn't like what I'd questioned, and it was just some things around raising concerns, which I would 100% do it all over again, because I felt I was standing up for the girls and the things I believe in, and helping to create a program that we can all be really proud of. So just a really, really horrible time. But it's created some change, and that's really positive for our group.
Yeah, again, well done to you and everyone that was involved in that and turning things around. And from a positive perspective, though, you're one of 5 past and present athletes, so hopefully I'm going to get this correct, that was inducted into the 2020 Olympians for Life program. That must be a really good honour. And tell us a bit more about the program, how that works, Rachel.
Yeah, I was, it was a bit of a funny one, because given what I'd been through, to then get a global recognition for essentially being a good person and my contribution to the community, and my work off the field, is what I'm most proud of. It was pretty nice. And yeah, the World Olympians Association, I think they started it for Rio, but each cycle they pick 5 Olympians or past Olympians from around the world who are doing things to help their community, and I guess a service to the community, and also promoting the Olympic values and showing the Olympic spirit. And I know that because I had to research it when they told me I'd got it. But yeah, just a huge honour. And, they told me quite a long way out before the Olympics, and I had to keep it quiet. But when all the girls found out, they were just so excited. And 2 of my teammates, Rosie and Sav, actually wrote a poem and did a full presentation for me, which I will never forget. One of the most special moments, just, the words that they shared, and I guess how they view me as a person and an athlete and someone in the Hockeyroos was, incredibly special. But I've worked as a nurse for the last 10 or 11 years. I do my mental health stuff because it's so important to me. And that's the contribution, I guess, the legacy I want to leave. My hockey, I'm, also very proud of, but I guess people don't remember what you achieved. They remember the way that you made them feel. And that's sort of what guides me, I suppose, with my actions.
That's so, awesome to hear that. Sorry, I'm a bit speechless after hearing that from you. That's what a way of sticking it up and not only making the Tokyo 2020 team and kicking butt over there in Tokyo as a goalkeeper, but actually being nominated for such an amazing award. That just must make you feel so proud and sort of, again, recognition and reward for all you did to be able to make Tokyo after going through what most people would not be able to deal with, to be able to train for 4 weeks for a Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah, well, it's probably, it did help guide me during that time. There was circumstances around it all where, I was having people ringing me from the media every single day wanting to hear my side of the story, and I didn't say anything. And part of it was the difficulty around, I wanted to get back in. So, you can't say anything, but I knew that my intentions were always good, that I've only ever done things to help, benefit the team and the girls and my teammates and the program, and to try and improve things. So, and then, what I do off the pitch, I know I'm a good person, and I have belief in why I do things and what I do. And, I've got great people around me as well. So that's what kept me confident and strong during that time, because it's no, I deserve to be in that team, and I didn't do anything wrong. The findings of the appeal stated that no reasonable person could have made that decision. So yeah, it kind of allowed me to keep my head up the whole time, because I'm proud of the way I act as a person and my intentions, and only ever want the best for the group.
And so you should be.
Thanks.
And speaking of proud, I don't know how you do this, but for 10 years, I mentioned at the start, you've been a registered nurse, and you've actually been involved in leading one of the biggest COVID testing operations in Australia. How the heck have you done that, whilst being a professional athlete? And you must have incredible time management, Rachel.
It is one of my strengths, I think, my organisation and time management. It's funny how it all played out, because so in March, when the Olympics were postponed and our program was called off, I was working at Fiona Stanley Hospital. I've been there for 10 years on the same ward, so working in neuro rehab, mostly stroke and MS, and absolutely loved my job. Had a beautiful boss there, and had incredible colleagues that have always supported me. But when COVID hit, everyone's prepping, and they closed a lot of wards down and opened up all the ICU beds and things. And because all the nurses stepped up, my 1 day a week nursing, all of a sudden I had a full week because we had no hockey. We were in a lockdown, and I couldn't get any shifts. And I went for a few weeks doing, a few shifts a week, picking up spots here and there. I ended up applying at 2 different COVID clinics, couldn't get a job. And I was just like, how on earth, in the middle of a pandemic, I'm a nurse and I can't get a job. And then, this opportunity came along with Mineral Resources. And it was honestly, I believe in sort of fate and all of those things. And it's like I just ended up in this role where they bought in their own equipment. So they'd got some PCR machines from overseas and wanted to run this mandatory testing program. Because at the time, people were getting, COVID swabs at hospitals and different places, but the results were taking so long, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, because so many people were getting tested. So we got these machines in and we could have results back in 4 to 6 hours because they were our machines and we were testing our people. So anyway, they threw me into this program, this COVID program, and I had a incredible boss, Matt Pilbeam. He was the head of health and safety here, also an athlete in his own right. He actually went to Paralympics as a handler, but supported me through it. And I'm pretty sure from day one I worked 7 days a week for about 9 months on this program because we were doing all these COVID tests for all of our people, and we ended up testing I think 60 other companies to help them during this time to make sure that they could go to and from site COVID free. And we wanted to keep the mining industry open. And that was our goal, to make sure that people were safe, that people kept their jobs. And my job was to help run this program. And it was just amazing because eventually when I was dropped from the team, I had a full-time job. Like we talk about it all the time of athletes finishing their career and having nothing. And, I've fought really hard my whole career to be able to work and had battles along the way with various coaches. But in that one moment, I was cut from the team. I stopped getting paid. I didn't get, any of the services or anything, but I had a full-time job that I walked straight into. And I think Mineral Resources, committed to me and wanted to support me through the whole appeal, through everything.
How good.
And I guess I try and give that back with my own loyalty and hard work too. And, I was working crazy hours on the weekends before and after work hours too, but it's because they would let me leave in the middle of the day to go and do my training session.
How good's that?
And I think, it's just like, you don't find companies like that all the time. And MRL have just been amazing. And it's very cool also what they're doing. I was a part of a testing regime that's not really been done before, and we kept the mining industry open. So something we're all very proud of.
And so you should be, and so should the team. And like you said, it's great that they've given you an opportunity. And it's funny, I can actually share my own experience. A couple of years ago, I was actually working full-time in government. I'd work in the morning. I'd go and produce a radio show during my lunch break for 2 hours and then go back and work again. And you're right, it just goes to show if you do the right things by people, they look after you, don't they?
Yeah, and if you want it to work, you can make it work. And it just comes down to communication and being open and honest. Like, they knew I wasn't ducking off and sitting at cafes or anything. I was leaving because I had a commitment to training. But if someone rang me at 7 o'clock at night, I'd answer it and I'd attend to it. And I think that's the level of trust that if you can create that in a company, in a workplace, then you can. It's the same as parents. People trying to look after kids and things. I guess for me, it's obviously a little bit different, but they allowed me that flexibility, and I'm so grateful because it meant that I had a steady income, I had a distraction, I had another perspective when I was going through all the rubbish, and I could come to work, and I knew there was people there that really supported me, and there was also people here that had no idea what was going on, but they were just my colleagues, and I could come here and be the nurse at MRL rather than the hockey player that had just been dumped from the team.
And that's so good that you've sort of had that extra, like you mentioned before, you had the opportunity to get away from hockey and talk to colleagues and not, get away from the whole situation. And it's great they gave you the opportunity, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I one of the big things I noticed, which, I can't help but mention, and it wasn't just at work, but I think a lot of the work I've done over the years around Are You OK and mental health, I could really see it almost paying off in a sense, because all of a sudden I was having to practice what I preach, and there was times where I wasn't, and people, would ask me, are you okay? And the answer was no. Even some at work, those people that you could tell intuitively probably didn't know what was going on, but could tell I just wasn't right. I looked maybe a little bit different. I lost a heap of weight during that time, definitely was not interested in eating and all those things. people just come up and just be like, I remember one guy came up to me one day and he said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And he knew that there was more to it. And he said, "Are you talking to someone about it?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He's like, "Okay." And then, just walked away and left it at that. But it was just like this level of check-in and support so that he knew that I was safe and he knew the things to say, the right language. It was the same as my teammates and friends. They didn't try and solve the problems for me. It was just, "I'm here for you. You're valued. We want you around," those sorts of things. "Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a coffee," whatever it might be. And it just was incredible during that time because, when people are going through something, generally you can't solve the problems for them, but just being there is often, the best thing you can do.
That is so true, and that's why you're an Are You OK ambassador and doing a great job of that as well. So,
Thanks.
And before we let you go, it's been an absolute blast talking to you today, Rachel, and clearly you're an amazing speaker and, we could talk all day. But for people out there that want to get you as a public speaker, there's now the opportunity, as I'm doing today, to talk on Zoom. We've got Teams. There's so many ways now of connecting. How do people get in touch with you if they want to get you as a public speaker?
It's a little side project, I suppose. I'm really comfortable sharing my story, but also hope that I can have an impact on people from a mental health point of view, even life balance. Like most people have jobs, and as I've said, MRL have been incredibly supportive, but it's some of those skills and techniques that can help navigate that environment. But I got a website, it's rachellynch.com.au, and they can jump on there and send through a request. And I'd love to do that. It's a really enjoyable part of my day when I get to do it. And it's always nice to meet new people and chat to people like you.
And vice versa. And thanks so much to Renata as well for teeing up today's chat. What a legend she is as well. And like I said, Rach, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you all day, but better let you get back to work. And we look forward to following your journey. And thanks again for chatting. And also well done to you on overcoming such horrible situations you've been through to, come out the other side and show that through hard work, you can succeed.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. It's been a pleasure for me too. So nice to chat.
Thank you so much.